All right, today on the Blueprint Podcast, we're interviewing Mr. LP with Creators Guild, one of the top places to podcast in Houston, Texas. Let's get it. All right, man. Well, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast. Why don't you just introduce yourself? Let us know like who you are, what you do, and yeah.
Well, first, brother, I appreciate you inviting me on LP Creators Guild Studios, Midtown Houston, Texas. Been in the podcast game for about 10 years now.
Okay.
Started like a lot of us in a living room, went from a living room to a garage, maybe from a garage to a space, and then now we have a full studio in Midtown. Enjoy the industry and happy for the conversation today. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I made a video recently, like highlighting some of the top places to podcast,
which we were grateful for.
Yeah, man. I always want to kind of show some love and just be like, hey, here's all the people out here that are occupying the same space I'm in. You know what I mean? And so, was there anything that I missed in the episode or in the video that like why somebody should go to Creators Guild?
Nah. What was funny about it is you was like, I don't know if anybody can podcast here, if they can or cannot. Like which we do have a like we don't vet anyone, but we also make sure that it's a good fit.
Yeah,
there's a style. There's a style on how we might work with individuals. But I don't think you missed anything. I think what you said was spot on. Our goal is just to be collaborative, man. We connect, we tell stories.
Yeah.
So anybody who wants to tell a story, there's a lot of good places in Houston.
Yeah.
We collaborate, we don't compete. So if you're close to us, then that'll work with us.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I just love that there's a community feel, right? Yeah. I kind of did some research on you guys on seeing what shows y'all have, and it just feels like the people that you're producing for have similar vibes, similar style shows. And so I like that because when you're thinking about creating a podcast, it's important to kind of understand who's creating for you or who's helping you or what vibe you're fitting into. Yeah. And so, it's really important.
Yeah. One thing I made sure is that, it was a podcast studio made by podcasters. Like I was a podcaster first.
Right.
Before I was an engineer, before I was a videographer, before I learned photography, I learned how to set up a mic and talk. And that's, for some people that can be intimidating. So in the community that we're building and hopefully continue to grow, et cetera, I wanted people to understand that you really can just come to a place and we'll coach you through the process. Right. Similar to the work that you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Love that. So talk about like why you started Creators Guild. I know you kind of gone through you've kind of gone through multiple different iterations, but like what was kind of the start and kind of why the current version?
Yeah. When I got involved, it was the old days of trying to figure out how to upload to SoundCloud.
Okay.
Like no one even knew how to find a podcast.
Okay.
I remember, the Apple phone had the podcast app. No one even knew what that was. Like, what do we do with this app? And then eventually we started hearing shows. Someone that I'm acquainted with out of New York named Chris Moreau. They started a network in New York called Loudspeakers Network.
Okay.
And a person that I'm acquainted with from OU, actually, oddly enough, they had an extremely popular show called The Read on there. And I was like, man, I'm going to try this podcasting thing.
Yeah.
And then if I figure it out, maybe I can help other people who would be interested in this, because all of us have a story to tell or something to share. And one thing that I've noticed is that people are intimidated in doing the work on themselves.
Okay.
So if you can offer them an opportunity where they can just come in, be talent,
right?
Oftentimes they'll take advantage of that.
Oh yeah.
And so that's where Creators Guild came from. And then also guild meaning protection. We protect each other. We're a community. So a lot of it is built around, okay, if you need support, maybe I can support you this way. You support me that way. And then we come together. Now, I'm always successful at that? Of course not. I mean, I'm the worst with I'm the worst with a schedule. If I make a meeting, I'm going to miss it. But I am working on that. That's it's not to my character. Right. It's just to, me trying to, get things going. But
what's something that you learned through podcasting, like something maybe like a mistake that you made or a challenge you overcome that you kind of learned in the process?
Yeah. One thing is with podcasting, there will be a mistake. You'll have a video mess up.
Yeah.
Audio will mess up. So you have to be flexible.
Right.
And when you're dealing with customers, you need to be even more flexible because oftentimes they're spending they're dollars that are hard earned with you.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I've learned is just being upfront with people. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
this happened, that happened.
Yeah.
Let me figure out a way to rectify it.
Yeah.
And then also maybe offering concessions and things like that has been a
Okay.
big part of my approach.
Gotcha. So kind of that customer service element to it.
Definitely.
Understanding that, like, hey, you know, some people do podcasts for different reasons. Some people it's for business. Some people it's for, you know, just a hobby, right? And so understanding how someone might have varying degrees of emotion attached to their episode.
And to me, I look at it like you're going to have an emotional appeal to it regardless because you spent your time. I mean, think about, you know, even if it's just an hour.
Yeah.
Giving someone an hour of your time is a lot.
Right.
Especially with everything that we have going on.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal for me as well.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. So what do you think is like the power of podcasting in your mind? Like what's the impact that you've seen it make on people or businesses?
Yeah. I mean, I just think to your listening habits.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine you listen to less radio, watch less TV.
Yep.
You'll consume things where you can cultivate your own environment. Podcast is your environment.
Right.
If I want to learn about Victorian murder mysteries, I can.
Yeah.
If I want to learn about sneakers, I can. If I want to dive into some complex story around sales or finance, I can. And with a podcast, you can find a community very similar to just like a internet search browser.
Right.
I can type in anything.
Right.
And I'm going to be able to find something I connect to.
Yeah.
So you can find your community.
Yeah.
And that's what I encourage people. So oftentimes podcasters have a similar lean in their style of show.
Yeah.
No, be unique. Because there's someone out there who wants to listen to you in your unique way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think for me, I've seen it build relationships way faster than anything else. Right?
Completely agree.
We've been pushing short form content for the last couple of years. And the cool thing with short form is it's accessible, but also like you also don't get to know that much about somebody. Right? You can see a reel, like it, share it, and swipe and be gone, and never see, you know what I mean? But the podcast, you're spending your time with somebody, right? You're getting to build that relationship with them. And so, you know, like even with my own business, I've got leads from my podcast in ways I never thought. Like, you know what I mean? Like we were talking before the show. Like I don't really talk about my business as much on the podcast, but people are calling me like, "Hey, I saw your podcast. Let's talk." And I'm like, "But you don't even like. How do you know what I do?" Like
now they have confirmation that what you're selling in your business, you're putting into action.
Yeah.
And remember, when you're in someone's ear, you know there's some science around this as well.
Yeah.
That's why motion pictures do better than you know. You can see it for an hour and a half. There's character development. I learn who these people are. Podcasts are the same way. They're in your ear. Right. Everyone has developed there's a persona that you've got on the podcast. Is that real? Let's find out if it's real. I'm going to call him as a lead.
Yeah.
And then, it's the same thing he says on the podcast. He does in real life. They're a customer.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that people try to resonate as well.
Yeah. Okay. So what makes a good podcast in your mind? Because there obviously are different styles of podcasting.
Yeah.
You got the crime shows, you got the interview style, you got the solo style, just all kind of, I mean, you can, like you said, you can find any kind of podcast you're looking for, but like, what do you think makes like an actual good podcast?
Perfect example would be, did you watch, when will this go out first off?
Probably in like 3 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So last night you had the Kendrick Lamar concert in LA.
Okay.
Were you able to watch any of that?
I didn't know.
Okay. So Kendrick Lamar had a concert and it was very authentic. It was authentic so much where this whole rap beef that he's been having with Drake, it kind of even leveled the scales even more so because it was authentic.
Yeah.
A podcast to me has to be you, your voice, what you're interested in. I can tell immediately if someone's just doing it to try to be popular or try to make money.
Yeah.
It's got to be authentic. It's got to be something you're passionate about, what you're interested in, and people will resonate towards that.
Yeah.
And then you'll be surprised that 10 listener will turn into 20, turn to 50, and then go up from there.
Okay.
So I think authenticity is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think I've seen people be almost too authentic. Where I've listened to podcasts of people like airing their dirty laundry, or like Jake Paul and Logan Paul have their podcast. And bro, I'm like, bro, I listened to that and I was like, bro, this is cringy. Like y'all almost like they just like fighting on the show, and I'm like, bro, this is like. So obviously, I mean, their audience likes that, right? So you talk about like, I mean, everybody's preference of how authentic it needs to be and how staged does it need to be. I mean, it's like, but that's the beauty of podcasting, right?
Yeah. And impulsive is crazy because you're right. They will fight each other.
Yeah.
But what do siblings do?
Yeah.
fight.
Which I think, I don't know if you saw kind of the beef with them and George Janko.
I have.
George Janko, I just recently found his episodes and I love his authenticity, right? Because he's kind of childish at times. I'm like, bro, this man need to grow up. But then also, like, you're just like, bro, it's real.
It's
right?
real. Very real.
So you almost see people growing up through their podcast.
And it's crazy. You got to remember, like, that's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
You're on camera doing more. People will see an evolution of you over your episodes.
Yeah.
So you can't look at someone from episode 1. That's another thing I love about podcasting.
Yeah.
You'll see someone episode 1, and by the time they're at 100 episodes, it's a completely different show.
Bro, how many episodes have you done at this point?
We've done 302.
Woo, dang,
302.
Bro.
Yeah,
that's wild. See, I thought about counting my episodes, and like, I don't know if I'm gonna do it yet. Like, I might or I might not. Like, in terms of putting it on the branding.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool to see, like, you can kind of almost like vet somebody based on how many episodes have they done. Like 300 episodes. I'm like, bro, that's crazy. I'm probably at like 40 right at this point.
And think about how much time you've included in your 40.
Yeah.
We've done 302.
Wow.
Yeah, 302. Now at the studio, of course, we're recording at all times. So
y'all doing thousands,
you know, there's people in at all times. Yeah. So
okay.
Definitely.
That's interesting. Okay, so the evolution of the podcast has also started to include video now, right? So a lot of when it first started, it was just audio.
Yep.
Do you have a preference between audio and video, or just kind of
I prefer audio.
Okay.
So I'm an old man, So for me, podcast becomes passive.
Okay.
So I can be doing something else, listening to it, driving, maybe on a commute, in the airport, on an airplane. If I got to lock into the video while we release videos, because that's a part of the connectivity that people have, I'm much more partial to audio.
Okay.
Much more.
Okay. Yeah. And that's good to know. And that's something that, in this episode, this podcast, we've only been doing video because I've been going exclusively to YouTube. I like the SEO and searchability of YouTube, but I've also been like, okay, well, at some point we do need to transition to audio because I know there is a level of portion of my audience that wants to be passive while they listen, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of like finding out like what do your people want? And so I think that's an interesting point in terms of knowing which one. And most people do both.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're a fan of a show or a supporter, I should say, you're gonna go figure out what they look like.
Yeah.
You wanna see the complaints we used to get. We didn't start video until probably like episode 90.
Wow. Okay.
And I can remember, we'd be talking about ourselves on camera.
Yeah.
And then someone finally commented like in our Apple podcast feed, no one knows what y'all look like. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So we had to start incorporating that as well.
Okay. And what's the name of your personal podcast?
So my personal is called The Poor Horseman, Pour.
Okay, The Poor Horseman. Okay, got you. And like, I guess what's the vibe? I mean, I've seen a couple episodes. Like, what is kind of it feels like kind of you're like those are your homies.
Yeah. Former athletes. Really having a conversation over a drink, and we try to limit the amount of insanity that happens, but we have a good time. Every Sunday when we record, it's kind of like a kickback. Also, we have a little audience. You've been by our space. You can, we can set up a little audience in there, so it gives us an opportunity to kind of build a vibe.
I love that. Okay, what are some of your favorite podcasts that you're kind of listening to right now? Yeah,
so you remember I'm an old man again. So every morning I'm going to listen to NPR and The Daily.
Okay,
so NPR, every morning I'm gonna get my 15-20 minutes of okay, what's happening in news? What do I need to be following as it relates to like global politics, etc. In addition to that, I'm real big into true crime now. Okay. So there's a podcast called Sisters Who Kill. Okay. I don't know if you ever heard of them. Okay. But it only talks about like Black women who have done some form of true crime. Okay. Really great show. I love the host there. And then I'm also just, I tap into a lot of the hip hop type things. Okay. So
you're very culture. You like the entertainment culture.
I want to hear those things just because that's what I grew up on, So if I can, stay connected to what's happening in that world, that ends up filling my bucket as well.
Okay. Yeah, I got a whole long list.
So what are you listening to right now then?
So I listen to like some business stuff. So Business School by Sharon Zavata.
I like that too.
Yeah, I listen to him. Ruslan is a ex-Christian rapper, and he kind of does some entertainment, faith-based content. Okay. I also listen to. I'm really big into college football.
Nice.
And so I'm listening to, just some couple shows on that side. So yeah, I mean it's kind of all over the map. Like I try to diversify. I haven't really got into like the true crime stuff yet. My wife listens to a lot of like story based ones. Where,
Yeah.
like, it'll be like one where somebody's like, "Hey, I want to find my long lost twin," and
Yeah.
they'll like go on this journey and find. And so she listens to like, I guess what do you call those documentary journalistic
Yeah.
style things.
Yeah.
So those are really fun to listen to on road trips. So
It's that, like we said, you can find your whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can find someone doing it. I probably have 30 or so that I shuffle through,
yeah.
but every day I'm gonna listen to the news for sure.
Yeah.
And then a few others like sports, of course. It's just a lot. I don't listen to the radio anymore.
Yeah.
I can honestly say I probably haven't turned on my radio in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, like, who does? Like, I just don't even understand how the radio is still like. Who was listening to the radio? But I don't know. I guess somebody's listening to it.
Somebody's listening to it.
Somebody's listening
not me.
to it. Okay.
So,
yeah. Okay. So what do you think about the podcast scene in Houston? Right.
Yeah.
I think it's something that I only have Houston to go off of, but it feels like the community here seems tight. You know what I mean? Like there's like I did in that series, there was 5 or 6 studios, and there's not really a lot of competition between you guys. Like everybody's kind of in their lane, serving their people, doing their best, supporting other people when it makes sense, right? So like what's kind of been your experience?
Yeah, so I have the benefit of traveling with podcasts also. So I've been to New York to see what they've been doing. I've been to Atlanta to see what they've been doing. I've been to LA to see what they've been doing. And I would definitely say that we're probably more connected, but at the same time, we still haven't built out the full process of being entertainers.
Okay.
Where those places, they've got established brand deals, opportunities to make money, connecting the dots in their community, maybe even taking some of the radio advertisement away from, those markets. Houston is getting there now.
Okay.
We have some shows that are very viral, large audiences. For example, Crew Season, Your Favorite Aunties. Even my show has a decent audience.
Yeah.
And there's several more that I could name, but the infrastructure isn't there. Similar to music.
Okay.
Our music infrastructure isn't as much here as it is in Atlanta or LA or New York. I think podcasting will kind of be in the same boat as we build it up.
Yeah, I was just recently in New York, and I did see kind of a stark difference in terms of kind of where some of the brands are at there in terms of their understanding of content, of brand, and so storytelling. And so, I'm excited to be one of the pioneers along with you guys.
You will.
It's just like, hey, this is kind of what we can do and how we connect small business to the storytelling element of podcasting. And it's been interesting. I mean, almost, I say 50% of my guests that I bring on have never been on a podcast before, right?
Wow.
And these are all small business owners and people, and they're realizing that like it's not that hard.
No.
Now I think it's hard to crack into the upper echelon.
Of course,
you know what I mean?
Of course,
really
of
being
course.
like you said, being an entertainer, being able to connect to those brands, be able to monetize. But in terms of like the entry level is not that hard, right? And you can still make a really big impact on your business with whether you got 50 listeners or you got 200,000.
Man, I think if small business owners could just pivot a little of their marketing dollars to a podcast. The gains that they would see would probably outpace anything that they've spent before. Even social media ads, Google ads. And the reason being is because people get to touch and feel you with a podcast. You're a real person. You're not just selling them something.
Absolutely.
Now you're talking through. A great example would be people that I've worked with, Marriage and Real Estate, Kevin and Aisha Shelton. They've taken their podcast from doing it in their kitchen to the studio to now they host a huge conference called Black Men Buy Houses. Where hundreds of people show up. Black Enterprise was here, all kinds of things. And that started from a podcast.
Kevin and Aisha have some of the best marketing, specifically in real estate, that I think I've seen anywhere, right? In terms of like, I'm on their email list and they have these really bite-sized, really valuable emails. They have these big conferences. They have the content. I'm like, man, they're touching every bit of piece of what they're doing, and they're showing up really authentically with in every area they show up. And so I'm glad that you've been a part of kind of helping them grow. And
no credit to me at all. I'm just saying I'm giving people an example where they're employee base of probably less than 40 people, but they're able to do things like they're a employee base of 500 people, using the power of podcasting, social media, to launch pad into different environments that they probably wouldn't have been. I mean, they were just on Bigger Pockets. You're familiar with that. There's not a lot of people who can get on Bigger Pockets. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's podcasting.
Okay. So let's talk about Houston. We mentioned kind of the difference between kind of some of the New York markets, LA. Like, what is it that you like about Houston? I think you said you guys have been here what, like 12 years?
little over a decade.
Okay,
a little over a decade.
So kind of what do you like about the city? What's kind of
first, the diversity here is phenomenal.
Yeah.
You can have people of every culture, every country, every race, creed, all a part of your friend group, and that's really important.
Yeah.
And that shows up in podcasting because you never know who's going to walk in the door.
Yeah.
So you need to have an environment that's comfortable for anybody. And the one thing that Houston does well is we make our city welcoming to anyone.
Right.
And that should hopefully show off on camera, in podcast, through audio as well.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think that's the thing that I was actually telling some folks in New York when I was there, and I was like, yo, I understand that like sometimes people look down on Houston or whatever, but also it's like, yeah, this is a hospitable place. This is the place where your hustle can actually get you somewhere.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of like LA. I mean, you could bust your butt in LA and never get to where you're trying to go because it's so competitive, right? In Houston, if you got hustle, like you will get opportunities.
and it's not all pegged on who you know.
Yeah.
In LA, let's be honest, there may be a gatekeeper or two. New York, we know there are a gatekeeper or two. Yeah. Houston, we're in our infancy of a lot of this. So there's still people who are willing to help, willing to show love, willing to show up. And I love that about this city.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so like what's next with Creators Guild and LP?
Yeah. So we've been pivoting more to the live experience. The one thing that I think that will really take the podcast industry to the next level is the live streaming components, and then also just live venue shows. Being able to connect with your audience, even if you've got 50 people who are willing to show up to you, you can make almost a living from that as well. But being able to add the live experience, the live production, the traveling production has really been something we've been honing our skills on for probably the last 6 months or so.
Okay, nice. And what are some of the steps that you're doing to get there? I mean, obviously you don't got to go into the business model of that, but what are some of the things that you got to do to get to that?
Man, level? I don't mind. I'm not a gatekeeper. I don't mind going into the business model either. So for me, it's more around, all right, one, staffing ahead of what you anticipate being your capacity. So right now, let's say we're doing X amount hours. All right, if I know we're going to be traveling, I need to have the staff available for double that. I need to have the equipment and easy ways that we can transport and move.
Right.
I need to have cameras in a way that makes sense. And that's really what I've been focusing on. Then also partnering with venues, making those relationships with places that people already go to that, hey, why don't we add a live, you already doing music, give me a podcast night and let me show you what it looks like on a podcast night. And I've got some relationships there that we've been building out. And I think that that'll be my way of being maybe a disruptor in the industry here in Houston.
Yeah, man, that's awesome, bro. Well, I'm excited to see you guys grow. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you're ahead of a lot of us. And I'm like, yo, I'm just seeing what you're doing. I'm like, bro, I'm gonna keep doing my thing, keep growing, and it's good to see role models in the space. You know what I mean? People who have been doing it for a long time, even before it was popular.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we even knew what to do with the podcast app.
Yeah, I had no clue.
Well, let me ask you this one last question. Do you think that it's too saturated? Do you think now that because the barrier of entry is a little bit lower, do you think it's getting to be where it's too saturated now?
Nah, not at all. You got to remember, 2 million podcasts get launched a year. Yeah. Only like 10% of those will make it past 10 episodes.
Wow.
So saturated.
Yes.
Like, I mean, it's going to benefit people like you and I.
Yeah.
Because the people who are serious about it will be willing to invest their time, money, and energy into it. But then two, more people will hear about podcasts. I mean, it's still a more affluent thing. You have to have a smartphone, or you have to have a YouTube account. That while most people go to YouTube, they're not looking for a podcast.
Yeah,
they stumble across it a lot.
Yeah.
So we're far from saturated. I would say no. Completely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, thanks for coming on the show.
Brother, appreciate it.
All right. Check out the next episode of the Blueprint Podcast.